I reclaim my life as my own, and I return to myself with boundaries that do not beg, peace that does not perform, and authenticity that no longer negotiates. There is a Jungian paradox almost no one wants to live through, yet it explains everything about your comeback. The tree that reaches toward heaven must send its roots down into hell. The deeper you fall, the higher your life can rise, not because suffering is noble, but because the fall forces you to meet the parts of yourself you kept abandoning. Here is the strange question most people never ask. What if the reason your comeback shocks people is not that you are finally doing better, but that you are no longer controllable? Think about it. When you were wounded, you were predictable, you explained yourself. You softened your boundaries. You forgave too quickly. You tried to keep the peace even when it cost you your peace. You were the one who overthought, overgave, and then apologized for needing anything at all. And to certain people, that version of you was not just familiar, it was useful. So when you return calm, clear, and quiet, it does not look like success to them. It looks like a threat. Because the healed version of you does what the wounded version could not do. It stops negotiating. It stops proving. It stops chasing understanding from people committed to misunderstanding you. This is why your comeback can feel confusing at first. You expect applause. Instead, you get distance. You expect support. Instead, you hear things like, "You changed. You are cold now. You are acting different." They are not reacting to your growth. They are reacting to the loss of access. In real life, this shows up in small moments. You do not respond right away. You do not rush to explain your intentions. You do not defend yourself from accusations designed to hook you. You simply stand in your truth. And the people who only love the wounded begin to panic because they can feel the old control is gone. So, if you are in the in-between season right now, the quiet season, the rebuilding season, the season where you feel like you are disappearing, let me name it clearly. You are not broken. You are transitioning. You are becoming someone who cannot be pulled back into the same loop. Tonight, take one concrete step. Write down one boundary you will keep for the next 7 days, and one sentence you will use when pressure shows up. Then practice saying it out loud once. This is how your healing becomes real. Silence can look like surrender to people who have never had to rebuild themselves from the inside out. This is the chapter of your story that gets misunderstood the most, especially in midlife, when you have already tried every responsible strategy you were taught. You talked it out. You gave second chances. You explained your intentions. You stayed calm. You stayed reasonable. You stayed loyal to the hope that if you just communicated better, they would finally treat you better. And then, one day, you stopped. Not because you were defeated, but because something in you finally recognized the pattern. From the outside, your withdrawal looks like a loss. You do not send the long message. You do not respond to the bait. You do not chase clarity. You do not rush to repair the relationship. You do not play your old role of peacekeeper, mediator, emotional caretaker, or the one who cleans up the mess after everyone else explodes. You leave the drama where it belongs with the people who created it. And that is exactly why some people start celebrating. They think the quiet means you folded. They mistake your pause for weakness because they have benefited from your noise. When you were always explaining, apologizing, reaching out, and smoothing things over, the room stayed comfortable for everyone else. Your anxiety kept the machine running. Your overgiving kept the story alive. Your endless effort gave people a place to hide from their own behavior. So when you withdraw, you remove the fuel. This is why the comments come. You changed. You are cold. You do not care anymore. You are acting differently. But listen closely. Most of those accusations are not about your character. They are about access. They are the sounds a broken system makes when it realizes it cannot pull the same lever anymore. Here is the truth that heals. Withdrawal is not a punishment. It is protection. It is what happens when your nervous system finally says, I cannot keep bleeding for the sake of peace. And when you have lived long enough to feel the cost of every false yes, you understand something your younger self could not fully grasp. Time is not endless. Energy is not unlimited. Your heart is not a public resource. Think of your withdrawal like winter. On the surface, everything looks bare. Conversations go quiet. Invitations disappear. Familiar faces drift. It can feel like you are losing life. But beneath the ground, roots are thickening. The tree is not dead. It is gathering strength in silence. It is choosing structure over performance. It is choosing survival over approval. That is what you are doing now. You are restructuring. You are learning that you do not have to attend every argument you are invited to. You do not have to convince people to be decent. You do not have to beg for basic respect. You can step back, breathe, and let your life become simple again. Mini practice right now. Write 3 sentences that begin with, I stopped. Keep it honest. Keep it plain. I stopped explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. I stopped apologizing for boundaries that protect my peace. I stopped trying to rescue relationships that required me to abandon myself. Read them slowly. Feel what changes in your body when you see your truth in writing. That shift is not a weakness. It is wisdom returning. It is your inner authority coming back online. And if this season feels strange, if it feels like you are disappearing, carry this reframe into the next part. In Jungian language, this quiet is not the end. It is the cocoon. It is the descent with a name, the night sea journey, the moment you go under the surface into dark water, where the old identity dissolves, not to punish you, but to free you, so you can rise with boundaries that hold, peace that stays, and a self that finally belongs to you. At some point, the surface story stops working and life pulls you under. In real life, it often starts with one moment that finally lands. A betrayal you cannot unsee. A pattern of disrespect that repeats until your body reacts before your mind can explain it. A conversation where you realize you are not being heard, you are being managed. You try your familiar tools first. You reason. You stay patient. You give another chance. You rehearse the perfect explanation, hoping the right words will unlock decency. Then the truth shows itself. They do understand. They simply prefer the version of you that stays soft enough to bend. This is where Jung's mythic lens becomes practical. In ancient stories, the hero is swallowed by the whale and disappears into darkness. It is what it feels like when your old identity collapses. The night stretches. Your mind replays scenes like evidence. Your heart grieves what you kept hoping would change. For a while, you cannot tell whether you are being destroyed or rebuilt. But the descent is not punishment. It is a transformation. In that dark water, you meet the parts of yourself you avoided. The part that tolerates too much, the part that keeps the peace by swallowing truth, the part that confuses loyalty with self-abandonment. You feel the cost of the years spent negotiating for basic respect. Then something goes quiet inside you, not from defeat, but from clarity. You stop arguing. You stop proving your goodness. You stop chasing the moment someone finally admits they were wrong. Not because you do not care, but because you begin to care for your own soul more. This is the return most people misunderstand. You do not come back to make peace with the whale. You do not come back to explain yourself better, love harder, or audition for understanding. You come back with a new internal law, a rule you live by when pressure shows up. It sounds like this: my peace is not up for negotiation. My truth does not require permission. My access is earned through respect. When that internal law takes root, the whale cannot swallow you the same way, because the hook is gone. The hook was your need for approval. The hook was your fear of being alone. The hook was the old belief that if you stayed kind enough, quiet enough, useful enough, you could earn safety. And once the hook is removed, the bond changes instantly. You return altered, not in personality, but in posture. You still have a heart, but you stop handing it to anyone who demands you shrink. You still forgive, but you do not return to what broke you. You still love, but you no longer confuse love with endurance. Pain becomes a doorway to the self, the deeper center of you that does not perform, beg, or barter for belonging. What once felt like a sentence becomes a threshold. The betrayal becomes a teacher. The humiliation becomes a boundary. The loneliness becomes a purification. The dark becomes a quiet altar where you meet yourself without distraction. This is why your comeback shocks the people who only knew the wounded you. They expected you to be apologetic. They expected you to explain. They expected you to be available instead. You come back real. And here is the deeper truth. This return is not luck, timing, or a sudden burst of confidence. It is the result of something deliberate and sacred. You begin integrating the parts of yourself you once exiled. In the next part, we name the force that creates this shift and ends the repetition for good. It is called shadow integration. Most people were taught to fear their darker feelings, so they spend their lives trying to stay bright enough to be loved. That is why the word shadow can sound dangerous. But in Jung's language, the shadow is not evil. It is everything you were trained to hide in order to stay safe and accepted. It is your anger when you are disrespected. It is your instinct to say no without guilt. It is your boundary that ends a conversation. It is your ability to walk away without explaining yourself to someone who has already proven they will twist your words. The shadow is not the part of you that ruins love. It is the part of you that stops love from turning into self-betrayal. Here is the real-life trap that keeps people stuck for years. Many of us were praised for being the ones who could handle it. You are so strong. You are so patient. You are so understanding. You can take a lot. At first, those words feel like love. Over time, they become a spell of endurance. Because when you are rewarded for suffering quietly, you start believing your purpose is to suffer quietly. You carry the relationship. You carry the family mood. You carry the workplace stress. You carry the emotional mess of people who refuse to grow. And while you are carrying everything, others learn the lesson you never meant to teach. They can keep pushing, and you will keep absorbing. That is why shadow work is not a self-improvement hobby. It is a rescue mission. The turning point arrives when you stop treating anger like a moral failure. Anger, in its clean form, is intelligence. It is your psyche saying, "Something is wrong here." It is the alarm system of self-respect. The same is true of discomfort, resentment, and the urge to pull back. These feelings are not proof that you are becoming bitter. They are proof that you are becoming honest. They are the parts of you that refuse to die, even when you tried to silence them for years. This is where the inner conversation changes everything. Day, you finally face the part of you you have been exiling. The part that wants to shut the door. The part that wants to stop being nice. The part that wants to say, "I am done." And instead of shaming it, you speak to it as you would speak to a loyal guard dog locked in the basement for too long. You say, "You are not my enemy. You are my protection. You were trying to save me the whole time." That sentence is not dramatic. It is medicine. Because when your shadow becomes protection, individuation begins. You become whole. You stop living as a persona that performs goodness while bleeding in private. You integrate tenderness and firmness, compassion and consequence. You do not lose your heart. You stop handing it to places where it is not safe. Mini practice. Choose one boundary for the next 7 days. Keep it simple and measurable. No instant replies under pressure. No long explanations to someone who distorts you. No rescuing people from the consequences of hurting you. Write it down. Then choose one sentence you will use when the moment comes. "I'm not available for this. I'll respond when I'm ready." No. Notice what rises in you as you imagine holding that line. Fear, guilt, a tightening in the chest. That does not mean the boundary is wrong. It means the old version of you was trained to confuse love with compliance. And this is what people do not expect. When you become whole, your energy changes. You carry a frequency that unsettles those who relied on your softness. In the next section, we will talk about why the wrong energy grows uncomfortable around you, and why your calm starts to feel like a mirror they cannot escape. The first thing you lose in real healing is the hunger to be understood by people who benefit from misunderstanding you. For a long time, you lived like a sponge. You absorbed tension in the room and called it empathy. You absorbed other people's moods and called it love. You absorbed disrespect and called it patience. If something felt wrong, you tried to fix it with explanation, softer words, better timing, more kindness. You believed that if you could just make them see your heart, the confusion would end and the relationship would become safe. But a sponge has one problem. It soaks up poison and thinks it is doing its job. Then something shifts, not in your personality, but in your nervous system. You stop chasing clarity from chaos. You stop over-explaining. You stop defending yourself against accusations that were never meant to be resolved. And without raising your voice, you become a mirror. A mirror is quiet. A mirror does not argue. A mirror does not plead its innocence. It simply reflects. When someone tries to twist reality, the mirror reflects the twist. When someone guilt-trips you, the mirror reflects the guilt without swallowing it. When someone gaslights you, the mirror reflects the pattern instead of fighting for the facts. You do not need to announce, "This is manipulation." You just do not participate. This is where real life gets very specific. They rewrite what happened, and you do not rush to correct it. They say you are too sensitive, and you do not scramble to prove you are reasonable. They bring up your past mistakes to keep you small, and you do not bargain for forgiveness. They hint that you are selfish for having needs, and you do not perform generosity to earn your place back. You simply hold the boundary you wrote down. You respond when you choose, you say less, you mean what you say. And that is when their behavior begins to reveal itself. Because gaslighting needs your doubt to survive. Guilt trips need your overfunctioning to work. Playing the victim needs your rescue reflex. When you stop offering those ingredients, the script collapses, the mask slips, the tone changes, the sweetness becomes sharper, the concern turns into pressure. They start repeating the same points louder, not because they have a new truth, but because they lost their old button. That button was your reaction. For years, certain people learned exactly how to get access to you: a sigh, a silence, a disappointed look, a dramatic story, a sudden crisis, a memory designed to trigger your loyalty. They did not have to respect your boundaries if they could activate your guilt. They did not have to take responsibility if they could trigger your fear. They did not have to treat you well if they could keep you explaining yourself. So when you stop asking to be understood, they feel something they rarely face: emptiness. Not the peaceful kind, but the panicked kind. The sensation of reaching for a handle that is no longer there. They speak, and there is no familiar pull. They provoke, and nothing lights up. They accuse, and you do not fall to your knees to prove you are good. In that quiet space, they are left with themselves. This is why your calm can make people uncomfortable. Calm is not coldness. Calm is self-possession. It is emotional sovereignty. It is the ability to feel the storm and still choose your response. It is the moment you realize your peace is not a debate, and your truth does not require a courtroom. If you are worried that becoming a mirror makes you harsh, remember this: you are not becoming cruel, you are becoming accurate. You are no longer absorbing what is not yours. You are no longer confusing emotional labor with love. You are no longer volunteering your nervous system as a public service. And here is what you should expect next. When the mirror appears, toxic dynamics rarely stop politely. They escalate. They get louder, sweeter, or more desperate, because they are trying to pull you back into the version of you that could be managed. In the next part, we will talk about that escalation, why it happens, and how to stay steady when the old system fights to regain access. When people lose access to you, they do not always leave quietly. Sometimes they come back louder. This is the part that can shake you if you do not have language for it. You finally step back. You finally stop explaining. You finally hold the line. And then, almost on cue, the old energy returns with a different costume. A late-night text, a sudden apology, a sentimental memory, a crisis that needs your help, a message that sounds concerned but carries a hidden blade. You changed. It is spoken as if you committed a crime, as if healing is something you did to them. Jung gave us a way to understand this without blaming ourselves. There is an unconscious cord that forms between people. In healthy love, it is a connection. In unhealthy love, it becomes a tether. One person begins to live off the other person's attention, emotional labor, and reaction. The bond stops being mutual and starts becoming parasitic. It feeds on your urgency, your guilt. You need to be seen as good. Your fear of being misunderstood, your instinct to fix the atmosphere. When you were a sponge, the cord stayed tight because you kept supplying energy. Then you became a mirror, and the cord started to starve. That is why they circle back. Not always because they miss you. Often because they miss the version of you that could be managed. They miss the old power dynamic, where you would explain yourself until you were exhausted, where you would soften your boundary to keep the peace, where your kindness could be used as leverage. What they miss is not your laughter or your soul. What they miss is access. And this is where the moment gets real in daily life. They talk like you owe them your old self. They imply you are selfish for having limits. They remind you of everything you used to be, meaning everything you used to tolerate. They may even act wounded by your calm, because calm refuses to play their script. In that moment, your nervous system will want to do what it has done for years: over-explain, reassure, prove you still care, make it comfortable again. But healing asks for a different loyalty. Here is the spiritual value you earn at this stage. You are not responsible for making other people comfortable with your boundaries. You are responsible for protecting your peace. The discomfort they feel is not evidence that you are wrong. It is evident that the old contract is ending, and contracts do not dissolve without protest. Mini practice. Use one sentence that ends the negotiation without cruelty. Say it slowly, like a door closing without slamming. I understand you, but I am not returning. That is not punishment. That is clarity. Repeat it if needed, without adding paragraphs. Your power is not in better wording. Your power is in consistency. If guilt rises, notice it. If fear rises, breathe through it. Those feelings are not warnings that you are doing something bad. They are echoes from the old tether. The part of you trained to believe love requires self-abandonment. Let them pass like the weather. Hold your line anyway. Because when that cord finally breaks, something quiet and stunning happens. The world opens. You realize you can be at peace without explaining yourself. You can be alone without being abandoned. You can be misunderstood by the wrong people and still be safe. And in the next part, we will name what this really is. Your comeback does not need witnesses. It needs one thing only: you staying faithful to the self you fought to become. Your comeback is not a performance. It is sovereignty. If you are waiting for the people who hurt you to finally understand, finally apologize, and finally admit what they did, you will keep your healing tied to their hands. And that is the last chain to break. The point of this journey was never revenge. It was never proving you were right. It was never returning to the room and forcing everyone to clap. The point was returning to yourself so completely that your peace no longer depends on anyone else's awareness. The healed you is easy to recognize, not because you look tougher, but because you move differently. You do not write long paragraphs to defend your character. You do not beg to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. You do not chase approval from those who only loved your compliance. You choose solitude over shrinking, because you have learned that loneliness is painful, but self-betrayal is worse. You love, but you do not barter. Love becomes simple again: respect or nothing, clarity or distance, truth or silence. This is what Jung meant when he pointed toward individuation. The privilege of a human life is not becoming someone impressive. It is becoming someone real. It is returning to the person you were before fear taught you to perform, before you learned to swallow your needs, before you confuse endurance with devotion. Individuation is the moment you stop abandoning yourself to keep a connection alive. So let this be your lesson and your marker. Your comeback needs no witness, because it is not happening on a stage. It is happening in the quiet choices no one applauds, the message you do not send, the boundary you hold even when your hands shake, the calm you choose when your old self would have panicked, the decision to stop explaining yourself to people who were never listening. If this speaks to you, seal it with a simple declaration. Comment, "I am done explaining myself." Or comment, "Return they feared, not to convince anyone else, but to make a contract with yourself, because the moment you choose your own peace without permission, your comeback has already begun."